Welcome, everybody, to today's Acronis virtual event, Build the Business Case for Upgrading Your OT ICS Cyber Resilience. I'm your host, James Slaby. I'm the Go-to-Market Director for OT Solutions at Acronis. I have a long background as an industry analyst at places like Forrester, covering cybersecurity and networking, and also at tech vendors in product roles in cybersecurity and networking as well. If you want to learn more about my background, just check out my LinkedIn profile. I'm just the host today. Our panelists are the ones that you really need to know more about, and I'll introduce those in just a minute. A couple of housekeeping notes. We are recording today's event, so if there's something that you want to review later or you'd like to share a recording of the event with your colleagues, you'll get an email link to the recording in a day or two. We're interested in your questions, but we're going to ask you to submit them via the Q&A, so you'll be muted on audio throughout the event. We're going to do a live Q&A event at the towards the end of the event, and we're really interested in your questions. Again, we've got a very experienced, deep panel in OT Cyber Resilience to answer those questions. So keep those coming in at any time throughout the event. I'd like to run a quick poll before I review today's agenda. This is an easy one. Just on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate the relative ease of starting a large-scale business continuity project? So while you think about that and answer that, let's look at today's agenda. Next slide, please. So we're going to start out with my colleague at Acronis, Tom Fertal. He's got actually a long background in OT governance and management and risk reduction. He only recently joined Acronis from that field. He's going to talk about his particular area of expertise for a few minutes. Then I'm going to ask Tom to stay for our panel discussion, where we've got Joe Barton, who spent 36 years at Merck and is still in a consulting contracting role with them. A real in the trenches kind of OT operations professional with an extraordinary background. We're also going to get my colleague Ryan Davis here. He runs our enterprise and OEM business at Acronis, and he's got a lot of insight. He's been working with manufacturers and industrial enterprises, as well as our partners in automation for over 10 years. And I'm going to take them through a discussion on both the governance and management side, and then deployment issues around cyber resilience and OT. Then I'm going to hand the baton to my colleague Josh Bryant, who's going to give a very quick tour of the Acronis solution for OT cyber resilience. That's just going to be a taste of it. We're always happy to give you a more detailed tour of it, but we wanted to give you just kind of the tips of the waves on how we approach some of the problems that our panel is going to discuss today. After Josh is done, I'm going to invite the panel back to take your questions. So again, please keep those questions coming throughout the event. At the very end, I'll wrap up with to show you just some further reading that you can take with you that plumbs a little deeper into some of the things we talk about today. All right, let's take a look at that poll, please. So nobody in our audience rates starting such a project as business continuity cyber resilience for OT as easy. Somewhat difficult seems to be about half the audience. This makes perfect sense to me. We know that this is a complicated and difficult, thorny issue that's going to consume a lot of your time and require you to kind of collaborate across multiple organizations in your business. All right, if we can move to the next slide, I want to introduce our next speaker. Tom Fertal is a veteran OT professional who joined Acronis to work with our automation partners, enterprise customers, and prospects on building cyber resilient OT solutions. Prior to Acronis, Tom spent 4 years at pharmaceutical giant Merck, where he transformed his backup and recovery capabilities and helped the company manage its manufacturing technology, risk, and compliance. Pretty pertinent to what we're talking about today. Before he was at Merck, Tom worked on Wall Street with investment banking and financial services firms on risk remediation, management, and reduction. Welcome, Tom, and take it away.
Thanks very much, James. As part of our warm-up, folks, we're going to talk a little bit about governance and a little bit about management, right? So ultimately, we want to be able to help people get things done, right? Let's get things started, get things done. The next set of slides actually has a background image. So um, in this slide, we're trying to formalize the problem, trying to size things up. Everyone, I mean, what movie is this? This is Jaws. So we're gonna need a bigger boat, right? So we're trying to size the problem. We're trying to formalize it. Um, your company may have different processes, self-assessment. There are different lines of defense, the first line, the second line, etc. There may be a risk register, but ultimately, it's always hard to carry forward good ideas. You've got to kind of work within your company's processes to just try to formalize that, right? That's always helpful. Maybe there's an audit issue that you're solving for that actually puts a driver behind the initiative. So this is the problem. Formalizing the problem. If we just advance the slide, you got to have a strategy. All right. So this is Back to the Future, right? So you got to have a plan. You got to have a strategy, right, folks? And again, we don't want to sit here and read through this, but this is actually, I mean, it sounds implicit, but you need to really cover all your bases, all of your stakeholders. For example, enterprise architecture. We deal a lot of the people that we actually deal with, in my role personally, it may be within a manufacturing space, there may be a lab environment, people are trying to actually get something up and running. You have to remember to include all the right stakeholders too, right? You have to have a roadmap. You gotta be able to operate within the operational model that you're faced with. So you have to be able to kind of have a tailored strategy for your environment. You're going to see one common bullet on these slides that is steering. So you got to have some kind of steering committee that you can check back with and monitor your progress with. Making sure that your steering committee actually approves of your strategy. Maybe there's an infrastructure that you're going to have to roll out as part of your strategy. Those can tend to be large capital investments, so formalizing it through the steering committee, that's another important aspect as well. Uh, all right, so I think we're due for another poll. Can we initiate the poll? All right. And our poll is the resiliency of, true or false, the resiliency of our technology resiliency platform. That could be, for example, backup and recovery, uh, however it's framed. It should be more stringent than the resiliency of the endpoints that you're actually protecting. True or false, right? So again, that platform can be framed a couple different ways. Maybe it's a data protection platform. Everybody can please respond to that. Wait just another couple seconds and then let's take a look at the results. All right, and another expected result. So I think a lot of people would agree you need to be able to eat your own dog food. So if you're going to run some kind of resiliency platform, it's got to have the uptime, etc. Right? It's got to have all the right characteristics. It's got to be built for purpose. All right, great, interesting results, but almost as expected. All right, let's advance our slides. Okay, life cycle. So if you're gonna run some kind of process, service, maybe it has an accompanying platform, there's a life cycle to it, right? So is it a net new? Does it pre-exist? Um, are there other things in place that are actually maybe there's a legacy process that you can replace it with, that you can decommission. Maybe there's a service management part to that older process. So obviously you're going to need to have some funding to do what you want to do, but you may be able to yield savings out of that older process, right? So you have to think holistically. It's not just about your little part of the world. If you can relate it to the other things and show how you can actually holistically think about things and what could be decommissioned, that's an important part of it. Again, you've got to be able to run everything through your steering committee, be able to get people on the same page. We have one more governance slide. I'm sorry, before we advance. So this is Neo from the Matrix, and he's holding what? He's holding a floppy disk, right? So you got to be mindful of life cycle management. Let's go forward one more governance slide. All right. I don't want to jump the gun. This is No Country for Old Men, right? So you have to be able to fund what you want to do. You got to have a business case. You may need to go to a capital review process. There may be corrective action, preventative actions that relate to this. Uh, there's every organization has its own kind of tricks and ways to navigate, but um, if you can think about centrally funding what you want to do, and that could be through like a central set of accounts, your licensing, as an example, different contractors that may build your process out. Um, you could then actually transfer that funding to local cost centers, et cetera. So funding is actually a really important part of it, and being able to navigate your company's processes when it comes to funding. I mean, it's a little bit boring, right? People don't think about it necessarily. They maybe they'll think more about technology. If you don't get the funding right, it's not possible to get things started, right? Again, you've got to be able to run this through your steering committee. Let's go forward one more slide. So what we talked about was all governance related. Let's talk about some management practices, and that really affects the people, process, and technology that you might have to think about, that you might have to bring together to actually do what you want to do. So again, this is operational technology focused. So you're going to have to be able to ensure the resilience of OT systems. What does that mean? Systems with OPC connectivity, or OLE for process control. You need to be able to successfully back up those systems, but also think about it this way: you need to be able to get clean recoveries out of it, right? A lot of our OT systems are coupled with computers that have legacy operating systems. You may be dealing with Windows XP. There may be systems that are air gapped. So have a think about that. This is what are the systems that you need to ensure availability on. You gotta be able to, you have to have an OT compliant architecture, right? So maybe a little bit more of an older school way of thinking. We've got the Purdue model, right? But does a platform that you might have to utilize, does it play within all the confines and constraints that are set up? Will it be able to operate within a complex set of network segments, et cetera? Your operational model, right? So a lot of times we deal with folks that, quite honestly, they don't want to have to add new staff. They don't want to have to run yet another new complex service. They want to be able to leverage existing resources, right? Uh, if you have to build out a platform, you want to have the right product squad to be able to run it with, right? You want to be able to, for the endpoints that you're actually protecting, can you leverage existing staff that runs those endpoints to facilitate your incident response and your recoveries, right? And, moving on, just in the interest of time. So really important to think about how can you employ self-service techniques, right? Especially around recovery. So if you're going to be leveraging existing staff, you don't want to have a new service request process where a ticket goes off and the recovery kind of comes back. if you you know, there's a lot of arguments to be made for employing self-service. So can you recover straight from the endpoint? Can you use some kind of console to initiate recovery? We mentioned air gap systems. Can we actually recover from, can we recover air gap systems? Just gonna hustle through the last bits here. Relationships. So if you're dealing with the vendors, does your vendor have OEM relationships with the OT vendors of the systems that you're actually protecting? Is your process, is your technology, is it used throughout the industry, right? In terms of recovery, so we all know about operational recovery. Can you bring back one server? Disaster recovery, maybe a building or a local computer room goes down. Are you going to be expected to do cyber recovery, right? And that's going to be a topic that we'll see next in our panel discussion. But can you actually, without doing a complicated trial and error, can you actually recover when there's a malicious actor involved? Downtime, you're going to want to minimize downtime regardless, right? These OT processes, some of them operate 24 by 7 by 365. So you gotta be able to deal with that. Storage, and this is not a complete list, but storage. Our poll question asked about the resiliency of your platform. There's a lot of requirements now for having immutable backup archives, 3-2-1 backup rule, right? So can you actually, again, this is not a complete list, but you need to be able to think about this. I think we'll be able to wrap up this part of our discussion if we go forward one more slide. So just something to think about, different frameworks, right? So certified business continuity professional, that actually influenced some of our governance points in the beginning part. I think most people on this call know NIST, right? So we just looked at some of the controls on the prior slide. It's helpful to just have some of these nuts and bolts kind of in your back pocket. And then there are other certifications, for example, around governance that are actually helpful. It's just something to think about. All right, folks, if we just wrap up this part of our discussion.
Tom, thanks for that. Fantastic setup for the kind of the heart of our event today, which is our panel discussion, which you need to stick around for. Joe and Ryan, if you can come on camera, I want to start off by introducing Joe Barton. Joe's an independent OT resiliency consultant and currently contracted to advise Merck, where he spent over 36 years as an IT and automation engineer specializing in pharma manufacturing operations. Joe's led teams supporting an incredible variety of pharma automation systems, led the design and implementation of capital projects for process automation, shop floor integration, facility modernization. He's got expertise in PLC skid systems, Delta V DCS, Allen Bradley PLC systems, hardly a corner of OT operations that he hasn't touched at some point in his career. So we're thrilled to have him here today. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
Our third panelist is Ryan Davis, my colleague here at Acronis, where he's the Senior Director for Enterprises and OEMs. Ryan brings over a decade of storage and data management experience and leads our commercial enterprise sales organization. Ryan and his team help manufacturers and other industrial enterprises to improve business continuity and reduce cyber risk exposure in scenarios like industrial automation, research and development labs, and edge computing. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we got a ton of a lot of years around this issue. I want to get right into it here. So, panel, I'll ask you if you can take the part of our audience here who are looking at trying to establish a business continuity function for environments running OT. It's obviously a massive kind of undertaking. Where do you start? What do you prioritize? Anyone, just jump right in.
Well, I'll start, James. So, I mean, for me, from the technology point of view, I mean, you gotta have people with experience with the shop floor where I typically work in, and anything at the shop floor, such as firewalls, how your distributed control systems work, because each system has their own unique function, and the vendor has implemented it based on what the vendor thinks how it needs to work. The problem that you always run into is that you have multiple vendors on the shop floor. How do you have all of them work together on the shop floor and make that system resilient? So, I mean, these are the things that I look at in terms of, and then the key responsibilities there is like, how you need to have those people to be able to do those things.
Yeah, and from my side, Joe brings a lot more firsthand experience in managing these environments than myself. But even from an Acronis-centric view, having the people and alignment in terms of how it's going to be managed and how it's going to be executed down to the shop floor would be the first piece, right? So the people, so you have alignment on how it would be managed. You have to know the environment that you're going to be working under. And so, some customers do that from a technology perspective with, discovery, asset management, technologies. And Acronis is making investment in these areas in terms of discovery and inventory to help our customers with that. But some customers also just do the inventory manually. They're out looking at serial numbers and on the back of boxes, right? So, to me, those would be the two places that you start. You have your Tiger team from an execution perspective, and then you do your assessment, you wrap your arms around the environment that you're going to be managing. And then, from there, you can start making decisions on toolings and solutions.
Yeah, James, I'll just add onto that. We kind of covered some of it beforehand, but having some of that governance in place, there's a lot of good intentions, right? And people want to get started. They know what the best practices are, but without a lot of that justification, I mean, ultimately without the funding, right? So that actually is something that we see kind of be the blocker. And so if you could do some of those, a little bit more boring, nuts and bolts type things, like from a governance perspective, that helps you get things moving too.
Fantastic. That's a great start here. I wanted to get to the subject of pain points, kind of the biggest challenges facing companies trying to run OT business continuity. What would you identify as kind of key areas to focus on? Where are the biggest problems going to emerge first?
James,
Feel
for
free.
me, from my experience, has been product knowledge. As we talked about in the first question you had, some of the pain points always been the product knowledge of how to implement something. That's been one of the issues. Also, the other thing that I've run into in my career is the attitude towards business continuity is, some people say, yeah, I'm not going to get touched with this. This is never going to happen to me, that type of thing. And unfortunately, I've been through a cyber event and people's attitudes did change after that. So I've seen that happen quite too often, where people have a comfortable mindset in how things work, which they shouldn't be that comfortable about.
Yeah, to elaborate on that thought, the nonchalant attitude definitely is a challenge right now. It's helping that from a regulatory compliance perspective, we're starting to see more attention to kind of business continuity and resilience in general. NERC SIP was really the only, and that was even industry-wide. It wasn't like a regional governmental regulation that had really specific components on business continuity planning and disaster recovery. But now we're starting to see that incorporated into other frameworks, like NIS2 in Europe and some of the other regulations in the Middle East. So that's certainly helping. But again, burying your head in the sand and just hoping or expecting it's not going to happen to you is certainly something that often we have to change attitudes on. And then I think the second challenge is just the heterogeneous nature of these sort of environments and the old way of managing them, which often involved some sort of splintered strategy of you'd outsource things to your vendor here, you'd have a consultant or a system integrator over here, and that really obfuscated the actual state, right? So that there wasn't a coherent strategy for most of these environments, right? It was, oh, well, I'm assuming my OEM here is doing this, and I'm assuming my integrator over here is doing that. And so that's the going back to the kind of people and wrapping your arms around the environment. The other piece, the biggest challenge, but I think one of the most important pieces, is to basically identify the outcomes that you want, right? So it's not about checking a box, right? Like you may have systems you don't need to back up because if they go down, there's no impact or there's not any sort of unique data or you got tons of redundancy. So you want to go through the assessment and understand this is critical. I need to be able to restore this, and this is how I need to be able to restore it. So that way you kind of begin with the end in mind, and then you build your stack of tools and you build your processes around achieving those outcomes rather than really either checking a box or pleading ignorance and assuming that it's somebody else's responsibility. With NIST 2 as a good example, now business executives are actually accountable to cyber incidents. And so there's teeth in the regulations now that are requiring organizations to have coherent plans and they can demonstrate their compliance to the regulations. So I think having a coherent strategy from a business perspective is going to be critical going forward. But again, it's also the biggest challenge they have to overcome because it's hard to build that.
Yeah, I remember when NIS2 came out and they had that new provisions in it that basically said your executives are on the hook both for financial penalties and potential criminal penalties if they are caught egregiously out of compliance. And I thought this is really a gift to people who are trying to get these projects implemented, because they can go to their senior management and say, this can really come back and bite you if we don't do it right. So I imagine that helps quite a bit when you're trying to get funding for one of these things. Tom, any last thoughts before we move on?
Just to expand on one of Ryan's points, right? You're not doing OT for OT. You're doing enterprise for OT, right? So you're building something at an enterprise level, right? If you could do that, if you could think with the enterprise in mind, you can actually provide a lot more value. You don't want to have that pocketed approach, that kind of tactical. If you can be tactical and strategic and balance that out, I think that's going to add a lot more value. So enterprise for OT, think like that.
Well, and actually that's, even to elaborate on that, and this goes into the team, the people, right? It's not doing enterprise in OT. It's taking enterprise principles and applying them in a useful way to OT. Like that is really the key concept that most organizations need to embrace and adopt. Because if you just take IT principles blindly and try and apply them, that's where you get fighting between IT and OT, and that's where you get ineffective programs, right? So it's trying to merge the best of both, where you take the principles of enterprise, which is consistency, standardization, automation, right? You want to take those principles, but not apply them blindly. You then work with subject matter experts on the OT side as to how you can implement them in a way that is compatible and functional within the OT space.
All right. A great discussion, gents. Let's move on. We obviously live in a world where some major cyber event, ransomware attack, hits the headlines kind of on a weekly basis, right? You go back 6 months, it's easy to find events where tens of thousands of users were affected or downtime afflicted an organization that cost it millions of dollars. I think back, was 8 or 9 years ago, to the NotPetya event. This was sort of the ground zero event, I think, for ransomware, the first really global, widespread event. Talk about a kind of a wake-up call I know it's what pulled Acronis into the cybersecurity business, is realizing we were in a good position to help uh, industrial manufacturers, other enterprises deal with ransomware events. But obviously, many of us are carrying scars from that event and had some real lessons to learn. So maybe some wisdom to impart in the sort of the forensic analysis and the uh, steps that we took to make sure that we could minimize the risk of a kind of a big takedown like that happening to our own company. I wonder if you could talk about your own experiences there in terms of handling the event and what you learned and what you did in the wake of it.
Yeah, thanks, James. Unfortunately, I did experience this, and it was something that one day everything's working fine, the next day it's your life changes. And one of the things that this cyber event, I mean, we were shut down in just a few hours. It wasn't something that took days or weeks. I mean, it was done within the morning, and it had spread across the entire company. So, I mean, all our enterprise and shop floor systems went down. The initial communications after the event, first day, were down to cell phones and pagers. So we're starting basically, kind of starting from scratch almost. But, our recovery effort to get out of this took about 90 days. And this is not something that, was quick to do because of the massive nature of the event. During that period, we had to prioritize what needed to come online first. Where we had to get our authentication up, which is our domain controllers. Then we had to get our finance systems back online, because you have to be able to pay your vendor, pay your people that are employed, and then we also had to get our customer facing sites up first, and then our manufacturing. So there was almost like an instant command. It was an instant command process going through this. But I want to concentrate here today on just what we did on the shop floor. Our backup systems were not 100% image type systems at that time, because this was about 9 years ago, and we had a mixed bag of physical and virtual systems. So, a lot of our systems, we ended up having to, we had to manually install the OS first. Then we had to restore the data from the backup system. And sometimes these backup systems access was restricted. We had to call somebody to actually help us get that done. Sites didn't have access to do their own restores like you do today. A number of systems are down for a long, long time. I mean, 90 days. That means your domain authentication no longer works. When you bring a system back online, you can't log in. And so some of the systems that occur had local counts that we could log into the rejoined domain, and some didn't. So even if your systems had local counts, maybe some of our areas didn't have access to those accounts. We would have to call them help. I know I spent a Sunday morning early talking to somebody in Europe trying to get some accounts, or trying to get them to log into the system so I could do some recoveries. All of this ended up it was a huge resource constraint for the recovery of the systems. And I think that's what we've talked about here, and talking about having people on the floor that can do their own recoveries, because this was a huge constraint for us in trying to get these systems back. Post recovery, we had a number of projects that were initiated for this. First and foremost was our firewall projects, restriction reports, changing how we do things on the shop floor, segmentation of the networks on the shop floor, and also geo segmentation of the networks, especially if you were in different regions of the world, which is something we've never did before. And then the new and existing shop floor systems were, evaluated, where systems, how systems should function inside the firewall using the Purdue model, and the firewall ports inbound, outbound had to be pre-approved. I mean, these are things that, systems now take a lot longer to implement than they did, pre the cyber event. And our initial post-recovery projects took about a year to complete, to get everything done. I mean, today, if we look at how we do things versus how we did before, I mean, we have to have approval process for firewall changes. You have to, backup processes are moved to the site. Backup storage is at the site. We have more resiliency at the site than we did. System restores are done at site on the shop floor system. So a lot more, and it's a lot more people with knowledge of the OT infrastructure at the site than we did before, and that was kind of key for today to keep things and keep that mindset of resiliency.
Incredible. It's like living through the biblical Great Flood. Amazing stories. Tom, I know that you have some painful lessons learned from cyber events like this. Why don't you share some of your thoughts on it?
No, I mean, look, Joe and I actually we had some shared experiences here, right? I think one thing, and it's something that Ryan kind of chatted before. It's balancing. You've got your CISO type group, right? Your traditional cyber group, and a lot of the folks in there have that enterprise IT perspective. Then you got people at the sites that might have more the OT perspective. The trick to doing remediation and actually adding resiliency, it's striking the balance. It's having both of those perspectives, right? Like not pure one way or the other, but having kind of like a balanced view and being able to kind of implement sound resiliency efforts, right? May include backup and recovery. Uh, Joe mentioned something that's like really simple. People don't think about it. What are the NPA accounts that power things, and what was the password at the time, right? Just like very simple stuff. People don't put a lot of thought into that. Who's going to be able to get access to it in a break glass way? So there, all these processes come together when the stuff hits the fan, right? And having good, repeatable processes going forward, it's super important. Sounds simple, but the devil's in the details.
For that, I forgot to mention, I meant to mention that Tom, you and Joe went through some of the same wars together at Merck at the same time. You actually worked at different ends of the same problem together. That's part of the reason that we were able to get Joe here today. Ryan, any thoughts before we move on?
No, I think Joe and Tom hit on them. The only thought and that I think would be important is it's also important to have longevity or sustainability to the frameworks, the programs that you invest in. So, those sort of events were, very helpful for our industry in terms of highlighting the importance of the solution and making sure you have a robust program in place. And so we saw a lot of activity around that in response to it, right? Investing people, teams, acquiring product to be able to do it. It's easy, and we see some organizations over time start to kind of revert back to the old way of kind of redistributing it, decentralizing it, and essentially recreating the problems that cause the slow response, inability to respond in the first place, right? And so it's important not just to look at these investments as a one-time thing, but to make sure that it is looked at as maintaining the reliability, the availability of the systems, which is an ongoing maintenance task, not like a one-time check the box and then you're done.
Well, guys, I wish we had another half hour of this, particularly to pick Joe's brain on his experiences at Merck over. I can't imagine what he's seen over the span of 36 years there. But we need to move on. Don't go away. I'm going to need you back in just a few minutes for our audience Q&A. But with that, I would like to move on to a very, very quick tour of Acronis Cyber Protect, which is our solution for cyber resilience and OT. I'm going to hand the reins over to my Acronis colleague, Josh Bryant, who manages our solutions engineering team in North America. very experienced guy in working with enterprises on cyber resilience. He's going to give us a quick tour of the Acronis solution here. Over to you, Josh.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to do this, and thank you all very much for your time here today. Like you said, this is just a quick preview. I want to give you guys a teaser of exactly what you could look to get out of Acronis should you join or expand any of your use cases. So let me dive into this. And again, if you want deeper use case dive into with me or anyone on my team, definitely let us know. There's going to be a poll at the end. We can do a deeper dive with you depending on what your use case might be. So you might see some flashy, cool things that I don't touch on, and that's fine, but we'll absolutely get there. So what in the world am I showing you guys today? I'm showing you two different consoles, but I'm going to be spending most of my time in the OT space inside of an air-gapped type environment so you guys can see exactly what that would look like. But the reason I have two shared out is I just want you to be aware of something. When you sign up with Acronis, you are able to do that tight air-gapped environment to support your OT infrastructure. And then if you do need any type of ancillary outside cloud type things, we also allow you to open up a second portal and have that be a totally separate entity of itself that is not in any way tied to that original OT location. So just case in point, if you have just one account, you're able to accomplish that because right here, this is that OT tied to a local IP address where I'm on a server for a local environment. And then I also have the cloud hosted environment, which allows me to do like my 365 backups and stuff like that. So just wanted to show you the breadth of what you're able to do if you did need to have a mixed environment. But for the sake of our conversation today, how in the world can we help you in the OT space around Acronis Cyber Protect? One of the main things I want to stress here is the ease of use when you guys do an implementation with us, okay? You obviously install a local server to tie everything to it so that you can access this server like I'm doing now. You then tie your agents to the endpoints that you're going to care to work with, whether it's virtualization hosting or any endpoint servers that you have within your manufacturing environments. And then as you can see, when I go to click on it on the right-hand side, it opens up a plethora of options for you. And again, not even the cloud-hosted environment. This is all within the air-gapped tight space. You know, what in the world now do we have at our disposal to be able to work with? The first and foremost thing is just how we operate with this. All the things that you see on the right-hand side that we fully support that you're able to do, all the typical things that you would want in that space, full image backup and recovery, even granular recoveries of single files and stuff like that within. All of that is a given, but I want to be very clear. It's just one agent, okay? So if you are worried about the ease of use of implementation or anything like that, it's just a matter of going into your ad, downloading your executable, and then pushing that out just one time across all your boxes. Any service then on top of that that you then want to utilize is at your disposal. There is no more installations you need to do. There's no more massive updates that you need to do. It gives you the whole bang for your buck underneath that one agent that you've installed onto that endpoint, which is awesome. You're not relying on so many different vendors or anything like that to get the best, you know, for your labor there. So let's just talk about the options here that you have. A couple things that I want to touch on specifically for your all's use cases. And again, not going to do everything as a line by line, but just want to give you guys a really cool preview. So first and foremost, what I want to do is just go in and create a brand new plan to show you some really cool things that you can do that they've talked about previously here through their PowerPoint presentation to you guys and their panel discussion. So first and foremost here, we can absolutely do entire machine backups and stuff, right? That's a given. But what I wanted to kind of touch on, right, is let's go ahead and say you needed to go a little deeper from a ease of use recovery perspective, okay? In the sense of like they were talking about. Maybe you don't have the manpower on site. Maybe you actually don't even have inside of the workers that are on site the expertise to be able to handle outages and stuff. And they just want a quick, easy way to recover. That is where that one-click recovery actually comes into play. And that is built in directly into here to where you can install an agent onto a server. You can then turn on one-click recovery. And what it does here is it will store a local backup archive and keep it updated based on your latest RPO trajectories and stuff. It will keep it updated so that all anyone has to do, okay, if I work at your manufacturing plant and I have an outage and I call you up freaking out, the most you need to do is tell me to reboot that machine and then hit F11 during the boot process. We then reboot it into what's called Acronis boot mode. And then that allows them to just quickly find the last archive, hit OK, and then we re-image that machine. There's no extra technical babble that goes on with that. It just truly is a one-click recovery restore without you needing to stop your vacation or come on site or anything like that. It's that quick and easy. The default for this, just so everyone has a mindset of how that would operate, is that would actually back up to the local hard disk of that server, right? So it's just a quick, easy recovery. However, I also want to stress that let's say you have a use case where you wanted to do this for several different machines and they have a couple different archive files and you don't want to put them directly onto that, we can support it by pulling it from a local NAS share as well. Again, keeping it within your IT infrastructure, not going outside of that air-gapped environment or anything like that. So really good, awesome ease of use on how that would work for you. The other main thing that I want to bring up with this, just as a quick preview on how this all operates here, is as you see as we scroll down the line, we really care about the actual integrity of those backups, right? We've all heard about, the ransomware attacks, bad actors that get into your state, and you maybe are not cognizant of it, or you don't have the right tools in place, or how in the world can you remediate those issues? Well, with Acronis, we have a couple things that, again, they're built directly into the agent. We have full built-in capabilities for you to do full scans of your infrastructure. This includes the operating systems, this includes the actual software that's sitting on there, and you're able to get full vulnerability assessment spit outs so that you can make educated decisions on when's the right time to bring those patch updates. And again, what's really nice about all of that is we do all of those patches directly within the air-gapped as well. You can go outside of your air-gapped environment, bring in those patches on a USB, plug it in, and then support all of that if you didn't want to internally ever open up an inside port to connect to the outside world. All of those different use cases there are absolutely applicable and met. But that's just vulnerability and patching for the security of your backups and your recoveries to ensure they're good to go. We also have active protection. Again, fully implemented and turned on. All you need to do is toggle this on, and it is a full ransomware protection suite at your disposal. So if you are ever getting hit with bad actors or anything like that, or if you ever do get someone that comes in and tries to do things like privilege escalations within your system because somehow they got in, this helps see all of those executables occurring, and then we can kill them, and then obviously let you know in the quarantine list that all of that is occurring. Last but not least thing that I want to touch on here is the actual ease of use of the recovery. So let me get out of here and show you guys just one thing. We absolutely give you full recovery of granular as well as any entire machine implementation. The entire machine implementation here goes for full dissimilar hardware recovery. The simple thing that we need if we want to utilize this in any capacity is all we need is an agent to push it to, and that's it. So once you put in your encryption passwords and stuff to access this log, you're able to, at the top where you see recover to physical machine, if you end up having an outage, you can recover it as a virtual machine within your environment. You can spin it up at dissimilar hardware by grabbing a box off the shelf. All of that is applicable to you. The last thing I want to bring up with this, and then I am done because my time is up, is the very last thing I want to bring up here is how we do the recoveries to ensure the integrity for you guys. When we do a recovery, we actually do what is called a malware scan during that recovery process with our agent, which is to ensure that if there was any bad actors or anything like that inside of there, that we just didn't catch because the vulnerability scan didn't see it, or the bad actor delay was waiting for that moment in time to start interjecting and wreaking havoc, we'll notify you that that's occurring, and then you're not going to get havoc wreaked inside of your system because we're going to see that and put that in a quarantine and not actually recover it during your recovery process. So that is just a small little preview. I truly appreciate you all. Like I said, we can do a deeper dive into any use cases you guys might have. Very excited to have those discussions with you. So thank you very, very much. Slaby, back to you, sir.
Thanks so much for that, Josh. As Josh mentioned, I'm going to do a poll in a little bit that'll give you an opportunity to say, I'd like to spend some more time talking with Josh or one of his SEs, see how this might fit in our environment. We would love to do that. Oh, looks like we're running that poll right now here. So if you can take a minute and let us know how you'd like Acronis to reach out to you after the event. You can select multiple of these if you want. We'll let that run for a little bit. But it's time for our panel to answer your questions. We've got a few coming in already, and I would love to get more. So this is your chance, audience, to submit your questions to the panel. So it looks like we've got, Ryan, if you could come back on and join us. But Joe and Tom and Ryan, I'm going to paraphrase this question because it's a little bit long here. I'm undertaking an OT resilience project at my company. Apparently, they're in process manufacturing and struggling with where to start. I feel that pain. How would you advise us as to how to structure a phased approach to tackling this? This seems to be right on the nose with what you were talking about before. I'm sure, Joe, you've got some experience to bring to this. Ryan, you've worked with a ton of companies that have struggled with this issue. How do you structure an approach to an OT resilience project?
Well, I'll let Joe and Tom with the firsthand experience give comments first, and then I can give the Acronis slant on it.
Well, I would say from my standpoint, I mean, how do you start this process? I mean, I know Tom had talked about how you need to get management buy-in, you got to get your funding, and then you got to get your people together to understand how to do this. You'll need people especially if your system's at the shop floor, you will need people to understand how the shop floor works. You need people to understand the tools that are being implemented in order to make your systems resilient. It's going to be a challenge to get all those together, and that phased approach is, you got to start with the management buy-in and the funding.
Yeah, I'll just add. I mean, great response. I'll just add. You got to be able to distill your problems, and you got to get everybody on the same page about your problems and prioritize them, because year one might be to just, let's say, build out a little bit more of a tactical approach. Year two might be to add scale to it, right? So get that steering committee, get everybody lined up on the actual problems that you're solving for, and then you wrap your business case around it, right? But you're really just solving problems in a particular order. So, Ryan, what did you want to?
I think you both hit on it, and so it's going to depend on the institutional buy-in, right, and the nature of the problem that you see, right? So to Joe's point, getting management buy-in, getting funding, that will help tell you, right? Because to do this right, you need to store the archives. You need to be able to get them from the machines to the storage. There's potentially licensing costs for product. There's people to manage it, right? So if you have all of that in place, if you have that investment in place, you don't necessarily maybe need to do a long crawl, walk, run type of progression, right? You can kind of build your architecture, and then you can build an execution plan. But a lot of times there is essentially a process of like validating, justifying the investment, highlighting the nature of the problem to the business over time to secure the buy-in, right? So you may see, look, we've got a critical gap here, but we have not had a failure. So at that point, your business may not be approving a large blank check, right? But as you identify and you bring up over time, look, we've got these machines, they go down, there's no protection. You can go through a crawl, walk, run, where phase one might be like getting storage, and then phase two licensing, phase three, a subject matter expert or center of excellence team to actually manage this centrally. So really it's going to come, your strategy is going to be derived from the nature of the investment that you secure from the business and the nature of the problem that you identify. I think the most common avenue is that kind of progression, right? Where you may start with a localized, site-specific, more of a proof of value, proof of concept type framework. And then from there, over the course of whether it's months or years, you move to a standardized approach where there's consistency across the enterprise.
James, if I could add one more point to this, show value as you go, right? Even if you're just doing a POC, you've got this collection, this steering committee, all these stakeholders. if you show the value, and I'm gonna look, Joe and I work together, right? One of the blessings that, like everything can turn into a blessing sometimes, right? We have an incident, right? So we have an outage on a system. We had to actually help respond to it so we could actually show the value of our recovery process, right? So sometimes people question, there's recovery testing and all this stuff. Like in that case, responding to an incident actually shows tangible value, like on stage. It was actually fantastic. So I'll just, that's something that was actually very helpful for us.
I couldn't have asked for a better three-part answer there. So thanks for that, guys. We've got just a couple more minutes for questions here. A question from attendee who says, can you explain in a little more detail on the best practice for the server that hosts the Cyber Protect infrastructure? So this is a question specifically about our approach here. Specifically, is it hosted on a domain controller or is it isolated? Josh, maybe you can come online if you want to get some input here.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. Thank you for the question there. Can you explain a little more on best practices on that server that hosts that cyber infrastructure? Yeah, so just real quick, so we're not mislabeling terms and stuff. If we mean the Acronis management server, that is going to be something that is inside of your environment. On side of a server locally, doesn't have to be isolated, but it can be truly air gapped. If you're talking about the actual ACI, Acronis Cyber Infrastructure, which is our software-defined storage, that can also be defined within an air-gapped isolated environment as well. So just wanted to make sure we're talking about two different things, but I answered both just in case. But it can be, there's no reason to put it on a domain controller. You can do it for the AMS, it will work. But it's one of the other things I didn't mention earlier, guys, is that the agent does all the heavy lifting, right? So when you're thinking about where you're going to put this management server, the management server is just telemetry data, sending and receiving. There is no there for the actual processing of the ingestion of information and stuff. The agent actually does that. So if that's the game plan there, you don't really have to concern yourself too much there. It can really sit anywhere that you all desire. So thank you, James.
Great. We've got time for maybe one more question here. Again, this is kind of a long one, so I'm going to paraphrase.
And yes, there is a Linux version, James. Sorry. He had a
thank you.
follow-up question. He wanted to know if Linux existed as well. And yes, there is. I see you in there, John Bray. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's great. Thanks, Josh. So the question here is, we've been trying to hold off an Industry 4.0 initiative for a while because we're concerned about cloud and wireless affecting OT uptime and operational safety, but it seems inevitable. What advice can you give us about embracing these changes? And I think what they're getting at here is more connections into what was previously an air-gapped kind of OT environment. So how can we embrace these changes while still doing our job around uptime? So the oncoming tide of the increased permeability of the air-gapped layer. Got any thoughts on this? So my own kind of take on this is, obviously this is a grave concern, right? We've had this operational model of isolation of OT systems. It's obviously not completely foolproof. There's always the threat of an insider attack, somebody bringing in a USB stick from outside and plugging it in. That's how Stuxnet made its first incursion into what looked like a really secure ore processing facility, and we all know how that came out. So there's no such thing as a kind of completely foolproof approach. But it seems to me that when you are faced with new attack surfaces that could introduce malware or other threats to your overall OT systems, that it's very easy to look to what is happening in the cybersecurity standards world, in the compliance world, and in the insurance industry. All three of these kind of great forces that exert pressure on us in operations have put a new emphasis in recent years on recovery. In other words, recognition that in an age of like AI-based attacks, for instance, something is going to get through at some point. And obviously, we're opening up to cloud connections or wireless IoT. That's new potential avenues for the evils of the outside world. The way the standards bodies, the compliance organizations, and the insurance industry have responded to this is make sure that you're doing a good job, not just on defense, but also on recovery. That you've got to make sure that your backup practices are up to snuff, immutable storage, 3-2-1 rule, and that you've got an incident response plan in place. There's a whole discipline around this, tabletop exercises, live fire exercises, and so forth. And they all are now specifying it in their standards or their requirements. So I think one way that you can help mitigate the risk that seems to be coming here that we, some of us can no longer kind of fend off because our executives see great efficiencies in cloud-based analytics or whatever, that you redouble your efforts around resilience, which frankly is kind of what my panel has been talking about here today.
Yeah, and just to build on that, James, I was a little distracted answering the questions in the Q&A, but I mean, ultimately, the old way of building a moat around your environment is not realistic. That's just the simplest way to put it. Whether you're talking about the technologies like you talk, where control system vendors, sometimes they've got applications that have the little cellular devices built in where suddenly you're bringing connectivity into an air-gapped environment, or other digital transformation types of initiatives with Industry 4.0 and smart factories, whether you use data diodes or other kinds of technologies. There's a lot of ways that there's different interconnectivity between these sort of environments, right? And so, that highlights the investment needed is not just in perimeter security or prevention. You have to have the resilience, right? So that's active, and then that's also reactive in terms of recovery. And we didn't even get into, I think, two of the more common causes of downtime are user error and hardware failure, like a hard drive fails, right? Those fail every handful of years in a lot of these devices. And so you can't protect against all threats. You can't prevent it from happening, but you can ensure you have an ability to recover in a business appropriate time frame.
All right, I'm afraid we're up against the top of the hour, and I wanted to give the audience a few things to read on their way out. So let me say thank you so much to our panel, Joe Barton, Tom Fertile, Ryan Davis. Really appreciate your insight and your experience that you brought to the discussion. So thank you again so much. All right. Just audience, if you can stick around for one more minute, I wanted to point you to a few resources. Acronis has been the subject of a couple of recent industry analyst reports by research firms that focus on OT, and they've had some very nice things to say about our approach. I encourage you to download those. We've also got some pages on our website. Next slide, please. That will help you understand our approach, both broadly speaking and for specific environments. We got some white papers there that you might find helpful, an infographic that might help you articulate the problem to your senior management, a whole series of posts on the Acronis blog. Next slide, please. If you're working in manufacturing or pharma, we've got some pages that are specific to you, and also a product page that kind of reiterates in a little bit more detail the kind of things Josh was trying to talk about today. Next slide, please. A bunch of case studies from our customers who are manufacturers or industrial enterprises, and some of our partners in automation. One of Acronis's great advantages here is that we are beloved by the automation industry. Many of them resell or reference sell or white label Acronis Cyber Protect as part of their automation solution. Take a look at those case studies. Last slide, please. With that, I'd like to thank everybody. ask you to, if you've got the means and the inclination, donate to the Acronis Cyber Foundation. That's our nonprofit that builds schools and gives technology training to children in areas of need around the world. I'd like to thank everybody for giving us an hour of your time today. We hope to see you again at another Acronis event very soon. Thanks, everybody.